Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this WBNG General Election Special, the Southern Tier Selects. I'm Nicole Long.
And I am Atri Maneshni. In this half hour, you will hear from two candidates running for the 19th Congressional District seat right here in New York.
Incumbent U.S. Representative Republican Marc Molinaro and Democratic candidate Josh Riley are facing off in the November 5th general election.
This is a rematch of the 2022 general election when Molinaro defeated Riley by less than a 2% margin. 12 News' Kevin Quinn sat down with the congressman and the Democratic candidate to answer some of the questions you, the voters, sent in.
All right, well, let's get right into things. There's some overlap in conversations about gun safety and mental health. Do you see these issues as one and the same, and how will you address both?
Yeah, so they are interwoven. I'm the father of 4 children. I fear, as any other parent does, for their safety always. We have a state that has some of the strictest gun control laws in the country, and yet we still see violence, and we see violence in our streets and in our communities. One of the things we have to do is take serious those who commit violent crimes with firearms. In this state, nearly 70% of crimes committed with a firearm are not prosecuted as crimes committed with a firearm. What that means is that they're pled down to lesser offenses. If you commit a crime with a firearm, the laws in New York ought to hold them accountable. It's why, by the way, unlike my opponent, who has embraced cashless bail, discovery, raise the age, all of those policies forced on upstate by downstate politicians, the ones that support my opponent, are making us less safe. And you've got to give law enforcement the capacity to provide for safety. And so number one is you've got to confront those challenges. Undo raise the age and cashless bail and discovery reform and clean slate. All of those policies Josh Riley embraces, all of them make us less safe. And it makes it difficult to confront violent crimes. At the same time, we know that incidents of trauma that people experience can manifest themselves in individuals acting out in a violent way against themselves or others. And that's why I led as a county executive in expanding and creating behavioral health services that now are the model statewide. The New York State uses the behavioral health model we created to provide opportunity to invest in mental health services, trauma-informed care, crisis intervention training. All of that's necessary and is interlinked. Enforce the law and the policies that make it complicated for law enforcement to keep us safe, prosecute those who commit crimes with firearms, and expand access to trauma-informed care and behavioral mental health services like the ones we launched in my home county. And all of that will help us to confront what is plaguing us, a culture of violence that has taken too many lives, and ultimately we can protect our neighbors and prevent incidents of violence from occurring.
It's really important that we remember and recognize that the vast majority of folks dealing with mental health conditions are not violent. And in fact, people with mental health challenges are actually more likely to be the victims of violence than the perpetrators. I don't want us to be in a situation where we're stigmatizing mental health challenges or disincentivizing people to get the help that they need. With respect to public safety more generally, I come from a family where my grandpa was an avid hunter. My mom was in law enforcement. I do think there are some reasonable common sense things we can do to make our communities safer. One example that I've worked on throughout my career, I don't believe that if you are convicted of domestic violence that you should have access to a firearm. I think the data show that is one of the most surefire ways to put women and children in danger in this country. And so I have advocated throughout my career to make sure that if you're convicted of domestic violence, you don't have access to a firearm. It's a real contrast with my opponent. When he was in the state legislature, he voted to allow domestic violence convicts to get access to guns. I think that's irresponsible.
Housing is an issue that is frequently tackled by local elected officials. How would you ensure the federal government is able to assist state and local governments that are receiving adequate funding for housing?
It's an issue all across this district, and particularly so here in the Triple Cities. A massive shortage of housing. It's driving up costs. Middle-class families are having a really hard time paying the rent, paying the mortgage. So some things that I would like to do around this Number one, right now you have all these Wall Street private equity firms that are running around gobbling up single-family homes. And what they do is they use the homes to then squeeze as much profit out of them as possible. We've got to stop allowing housing to be a driver of profits in this country and get back to it being a human right and a source of shelter. Look, I grew up in an EJ house on Birdsall Street in West Endicott, and those houses, they all looked the same. It was a really tight-knit, blue-collar, middle-class community. And those houses were provided to the workers for $1 down, a 0% mortgage. And that's how you build a strong middle class in this country. You give working folks an opportunity to share in the rewards of their labor. So we've got to get back to that. One really important thing that I think we need to do at the federal level is build a lot of new housing. In some ways, this problem isn't all that complicated. We just don't have enough housing, and so we need to build more affordable housing. And when I say affordable housing, I mean not just low income, but really for the middle class. And so we should make the investments that are necessary to construct that housing. And I think it's really important that when we do that, we're using local labor unions to do it, because we want to make sure the wages are good. We want to make sure those economic benefits stay in the community. If we can increase the housing stock, do it using local labor, it would relieve a lot of the pressure that we're seeing today.
First, the housing crunch is a reality of lack of housing stock. We need more housing constructed and rehabbed in communities like Binghamton and cities and villages all across upstate New York. But when you have New York City handing out $40,000 checks, housing checks, to those who cross into this country illegally. Again, policies my opponent embraces. His mass amnesty bill gives these things to individuals who cross into this country illegally. That adds an undue burden and pressure. Of course, housing prices in upstate New York go up. But at the same time, what we absolutely have to do, and we've been working with Republicans and Democrats locally, we launched Broom's Next Chapter. This is an effort to ensure that federal resources are made available to drive down housing costs. And the way you do that is build more middle-class housing. It's helping to revitalize homes in cities and villages like Endicott and Binghamton and all across upstate New York. I lead the effort to ensure low-income housing credits and housing tax benefits for seniors who want to buy homes and those with disabilities who need access to housing. And so for me, it's an all-of-above approach. You've got to build more. We've got to invest in infrastructure to drive down cost, which we've led in. We've directed some $35 million in aid directly back into our communities to invest in water and sewer infrastructure, highway and road repair, in order to drive down costs and make it more affordable to build new housing. So increasing the housing stock, reinvesting in city centers, revitalizing housing stock by supporting those efforts, but also then making sure that federal dollars, the dollars you pay, your tax dollars, shouldn't go to Washington, D.C. or other states. They should go right back here into our communities, and we've helped direct those dollars to drive down infrastructure costs to make it more affordable for housing. And then again, leading a bipartisan effort through tax policy to drive down the cost to new homeowners, middle-class families, seniors, and those with disabilities. All tools that can effectively get people into homes and build new homes to drive down cost.
Well, things are just getting started on this WBNG general election special.
Coming up after the break, we'll hear more from the 19th Congressional District candidates and their stance on the topic weighing heavy in all elections across the nation.
Welcome back to the WBNG Election Special, the Southern Tier Selects, where tonight we're focusing on the race for the 19th Congressional District.
12 News' Kevin Quinn spoke with Democratic candidate Attorney Josh Riley and incumbent Congressman Marc Molinaro about their stance on two hot topics, abortion and the border. Take a look.
What is your stance on abortion rights?
I want to be very, very clear on this. I believe that abortion is health care, and women's healthcare decisions are women's healthcare decisions, and politicians and the government should stay out of it. These are some of the most difficult and painful decisions that families have to make, and the last thing they need are politicians knocking on the door and saying, here's what you can and cannot do. I trust families to make these difficult decisions, and this is a real contrast in this race between my opponent and me. I commit to sponsor the Women's Health Protection Act when I get to Congress. That is a promise I am making to voters. That law would undo the damage from the Roe v. Wade decision being overturned. My opponent's record on this is very different. He has been a politician for over 30 years, and in his 3 decades in office, he has been anti-choice every single step of the way. So it was no surprise when he got to Congress and he voted not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times. He voted 13 times to restrict women's access to abortion services. And while he was doing all of that, he refused to sponsor the Women's Health Protection Act. And on top of all of that, when he was behind closed doors in the fall of 2022, he expressed his support for an abortion ban. I believe women's health care decisions are women's health care decisions. I go to Congress, I'm going to put Roe v. Wade back into law.
What I believe is that, and I mean this sincerely, and I want women and families to know this, when it comes to reproductive health, the decision ought to be left to a woman and her physician, not Washington, D.C. And that's why I have opposed and remain opposed to a national abortion ban. I mean this with great conviction. Women ought to be respected for the decision they make, and families ought to be supported when they make those decisions. And so for me, no national abortion ban, absolute commitment to ensuring broad access to IVF, which can be heart-wrenching and difficult, access to and codification protection to access to birth control and mifepristone. I'm the first Republican in Congress to join my Democratic colleagues in supporting a bill to codify access to IVF, to codify access to birth control. And I lead the bipartisan coalition for rural health clinics. It's important that in communities like ours, now we're here in the Binghamton region, but I represent 11 counties in rural and upstate New York. There are women who don't have access to prenatal and neonatal care. I lead the bipartisan coalition to fund broad access to rural and federal health clinics and telehealth so that women and families have access to the health care that they need, and when they make the choice that they make, that they have that support. I will continue to advocate for that, lead on that, and my opponent's lying. The TV ads, they're just dishonest. I absolutely respect the choice women make and believe that that choice ought to be left to them and their physician, not Washington, D.C.
The border is, of course, a very contested issue in this country. You've ran campaign ads about a Peruvian national arrested in Broome County for murder. What do you think needs to be done to secure the border in this country?
Yeah, well, first we have to secure the border, but one of the reasons we can't, we've seen about 10.5 million illegal immigrants come over into this country over the last 4 years. Why? Because of policies that my opponent fought for. You know, this is the funny thing about elections. You can put up TV ads to kind of rewrite your own history. But Josh Riley spent 20 years working for both a corporate law firm and in the United States Senate. As a corporate lawyer, Josh went to court, the Supreme Court, 32 times to dismantle border security. So understand, 32 separate times. He brings action against the United States for the purposes of dismantling border security. And when he worked in the United States Senate, he wrote legislation that extended mass amnesty, hotels, credit cards, transportation, health care, to those who cross into this country illegally. And when Joe Biden became president, he used the Josh Riley legal argument, prosecutorial discretion is what they call it. What it is catch and release. It's like cashless bail in New York. Josh Riley's argument before the Supreme Court was that those who are empowered to prosecute the law, to protect us at the border, could choose not to. And that's what they did. They chose not to. They dismantled border security. 10.5 million people come into this country. And then we saw, because of sanctuary city policies that Kathy Hochul has imposed on the state of New York, Josh Riley supports, we have a state that has extended not only free housing, cell phones, health care, and in the city of New York, illegal immigrants are even getting $40,000 housing credits to go out and buy homes. I mean, I represent families that don't even make $40,000 a year, and here they are competing with those who crossed in this country illegally because of the policies my opponent embraced, advocated for and fought for. We have to secure the border. I voted for, a year and a half ago, strictest border security policy in generations. That's physical barrier, that's technological barrier, and it's dollars for the law enforcement at the border, Border Patrol. Border Patrol Union endorses me, supports my candidacy, because we know that that's step one.
Look, politicians from both parties, Democrats and Republicans, have massively failed on this issue. They're too busy playing games with it, pointing fingers at each other, and I'm so frustrated, like so many of your viewers are, with all of the politics around this. It's time for the politicians from both parties to stop screwing around and secure the border. My plan would send thousands of additional Border Patrol agents to the border. I think we should build physical barriers where it makes sense to do that. There was a bipartisan bill that was supported by the Border Patrol Union that would have solved this problem months ago. I would have supported that bill. My opponent opposed that bill because he's more interested in having a problem to campaign on than solving the problem. And not only did he reject a solution to the problem, all he has had to offer voters over the last couple of months on this issue are deranged conspiracy theories about immigrants eating pets. I mean, that is not somebody who is serious about solving this problem. So, I've been critical of both parties. I'm serious about getting the job done.
Those were two great questions from our viewers.
And very important questions, but there is still more to come here on our Southern Tier Selects election special coverage of the 19th Congressional District race.
And we'll be right back.
Thanks for sticking with us for this general election special on the 19th Congressional District race.
The next part of our interviews with Congressman Marc Molinaro and Josh Riley tackle the subject of political tension, and here's what they had to say.
Well, the political environment in this country is currently heated. What are some steps that you think that could be taken to ease political tensions in this country?
Yeah, so I've committed myself to working with anybody who wants to really solve the problems that face us. And I do think that that's important. We all ought to tone down the language a little bit and learn to work with one another. But that doesn't mean not fighting for the things that are really important. And so I just would say, I look at the two of us, me and my opponent. He spent the last 20 years working in Washington, D.C., working in a very partisan political way. I spent the last 30 years working across the aisle in everything we do because it is that important. I think being an example is how you tone things down. It's making sure, by the way, that the language we use and the actions we take are responsible. And I'll leave you with this one example. My son, all my children, I have 4 children, and I love them, all of them equally. My wife and I are so amazed by them. My son, Eli, 7 years old, at an event we were attending, came to us sobbing, crying, and we asked him why. And he said that one of his friends was pointing at that girl over there and said, "Look at her, she's weird. She's not doing what all those other kids are doing." That girl was my daughter, Abigail, who lives with a disability. Even the simplest of words, like "that girl is weird," sends a message to our kids. For me, I want everybody to know that everybody, regardless of party, no matter who you pray to, no matter who you love, no matter who you believe yourself to be, has a right to exist peacefully, has the right to achieve success for themselves, and to define what success means for themselves. I want a government that respects that. I want a government that supports that. And I want to be sure that I'm a representative that gives voice to that. And so when I go to Washington, I don't go unarmed. I go armed with 750,000 different opinions. And all of them are of value. And by saying that and meeting people where they are, that's how you tone things down. That's how you get people to work together. And that's how you become not only bipartisan, but productive as well. Simply meeting people where they are and helping them get to where we need to be. That's my commitment. It's how I do. It's how I represent people, and it's what I believe.
I'm a Democrat, and I come from a Republican family, so I love this question. I take a lot of pride as a Democrat running for Congress in a very divided district in making sure I'm spending a lot of time in places that, frankly, Democrats historically have not shown up. And I get to talk to people from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, all different political persuasions. And this experience of running for Congress in upstate New York has convinced me in my heart and soul that we as people are nowhere nearly as divided as our politics would have us seem. If the only thing you knew about American politics is what you saw on cable news every night or what was happening in the, within the establishment, you would think that we were hopelessly divided. And what I've actually found talking to folks, the first question I ask is never, are you a Democrat or Republican? It's never, who are you voting for? It's always, what keeps you up at night? What are the conversations you and your family are having at the kitchen table? And through those conversations, I have found we just share so much in common. There's so much more that unites us as upstate New Yorkers than divides us. And so I think it's just a matter of giving each other the benefit of the doubt, treating each other with decency, and really being willing to have those conversations with people who might not share your political views.
Well, thank you once again for sitting down with us ahead of the general election.
Really happy to do it anytime.
We are very appreciative of both Josh Riley and Congressman Molinaro for sitting down with us and giving you, the Southern Tier, the answers to your most important questions.
But don't go anywhere, we're not finished yet. Coming up after the break, we will look at what's to come this week on our WBNG election special coverage.
Welcome back to WBNG's election special, focusing on the 19th Congressional District here in New York.
Republican incumbent U.S. Representative Marc Molinaro and Democratic candidate Josh Riley are facing off next week in the November 5th general election.
Again, this is a rematch of the 2022 general election when Molinaro defeated Riley by less than a 2% margin.
It's going to be an interesting one to watch for sure.
But that isn't the only race we're going to be talking about.
Coming up tomorrow, 12 News sits down with the candidates for the 52nd State Senate District, Mike Siegler and incumbent Democrat Leah Webb.
Then on Wednesday, we speak with incumbent Donna Lupardo and Republican candidate Lisa O'Keefe, the candidates for the 123rd Assembly District. Both shows will air right here at 7 p.m.
Oh, but there's more. You can watch the full interviews with the candidates on WBNG's YouTube page. You can scan the QR code you see right there on your screen, or head to our website and click on the YouTube link to get there.
Well, that's going to do it here for us on WBNG's Southern Tier Select special coverage of the 19th Congressional District seat.
Thanks for watching, and remember to tune in tomorrow, same time and same place. Have a good night, and don't forget to vote.